legs. I mean, it hurt in the back of my calves. It was just this pain I can't even explain. So I told my charge nurse and I said, listen, something's not right. And so they hooked me up to a heart monitor. My heart rate was 131. My blood pressure seemed okay, but it was mainly my heart. And she joked around with me and told me I needed to stay off the skis because I love drinking skis at work. And I told her it wasn't that. I just knew there was something that was wrong with me. So I stayed up through the whole night, couldn't go to sleep because I was ready to call the doctor that morning. So I made an appointment and I went in. I think it was like 2 o'clock that afternoon. And of course, my husband, he went to Lexington to work, so he had no idea I made this appointment to the doctor. I go and I just explained to him, I think it's stress induced from work, school, life in general. And he said, well, let's hook you up to a heart monitor for 24 hours and let's see what happens. So I did that, and then he gave me some, I don't even remember what it's called, some type of medicine that decreases your heart rate. So I went and got that filled, and I had to work that night, so I went home, just kind of relaxed a little bit, and about 5 o'clock I get a phone call from Dr. Rogers. And he said, Natalia, he said, you're losing some blood. I said, oh, really? I haven't noticed it. And he said, well, your hemoglobin is at 5.2. And if any of y'all know, your hemoglobin is supposed to be 12 or above. And he said, so, have you noticed any loss of blood? And I said, no. And he said, well, I think you need to come to the hospital and get some blood transfusions. I said, well, Dr. Rogers, I got to work tonight. I said, I can't do that. He said, well, I recommend that you do. So I called my husband and I said, I went to the doctor and didn't tell you this, but they called back and this is what they said. He's like, oh, okay, like it was nothing. Okay, thanks. So I called mom, and you can always count on your mom. As soon as you hear her voice, you just start bawling. You can't even get out what you're wanting to say. And she's trying to tell me to calm down, which I know she was going crazy on the other end, not living 2 hours away, not being able to be here. So she made phone calls, and in the meantime, my husband called his mother. So then while I'm on the phone with my mom, his mom calls me and was like, I'm coming to get you. You stay at your apartment. I'm taking you to the hospital. So I get there, and my husband finally gets there, and a couple other family members show up, and we're just kind of hee-hawing around the room. Oh, I'm just getting blood. It's nothing. I'm anemic, or I've just got something bleeding inside of me. They can go in and fix it. So they ended up giving me, I think, 2 units of blood that night. And that following day, they redid my blood work. My hemoglobin only came up to like a 7.9. So they were going to wait a little bit, and they gave me another unit of blood, and then they were going to check it. That didn't happen. Later on that afternoon, I had a nurse come in to make sure I had family members in the room with me. And it was my husband, my grandfather, and my mother showed up. And I think that was it. We were all sitting around just chitting, chatting, not a worry in the world, just talking. And when that nurse comes in, that room was dead silent. None of us spoke. We all just stared at each other like, bad news is coming. So we're sitting there waiting for Dr. Rogers to come in, and before he even came in, we gathered around and we prayed, and, just hoping that it was something small that was fixable. And he comes in and he said, I don't know how to tell you this, but I think you have leukemia. As a 25-year-old laying there in that bed, that's the last thing that you would even think possible. I remember sitting there. My grandfather at the foot of my bed, rubbing my feet. My mom at the head of my bed, rubbing my head. And all I could think was, please God, I don't want to die. And I remember looking at my mom and telling her that, and she said, honey, you're not going to die. You're not. Little did I know, my husband leaves the room. He's out in the hallway, he's down on his knees, crying. I later hear my mother, she leaves the room, goes down the hallway with my sister, she works at the hospital too. And all I could hear was this shrill, this scream, the cry. And it sounded like somebody had died just then. My mother broke the news to my sister. And at the time, me and my sister were inseparable. We were very close. So the doctor, talks to us. He writes up the orders, and he said, we've got a bed for you in Louisville. You need to be there by 8 o'clock in the morning tomorrow, which would have been the 15th. So by this time, there was a lot more family members and everybody in the room, and they gave us an option. They said, you can either stay here in the hospital, or you can go home and be in your bed. We didn't know it was going to be the last night, but it was the last night for about a month. We elected to go home, and we had a little party before I ended up going out that next morning. Family, friends, co-workers, everyone stopped by the house, and we sat around, prayed, we cried together. Kids ran around, they didn't have a clue what was going on. And I remember I was getting in the shower before everybody came over, and that was my time. That was my time to myself, talking to God. And I remember I couldn't even get through the shower, because I was sitting there thinking, this could be the last time that I could actually wash my hair. My hands just running through my hair, and I couldn't even do it. So my sister comes in, and I felt like I was a patient in my own line of work, and my sister comes in, and she finishes washing my hair for me. And I just sit there and I just bawl. Then my mother comes in after I get out, and we just sit there and we have a little powwow. And I informed my mother that I wasn't too worried about myself at that point. The thing that kept running through my mind is the fact that my husband, I'm sorry, Andy, but my husband used to call me his leukemia child. And this was way before I got sick. Because I always complained about something. I was a complainer. And I would complain about a runny nose, I would complain about a headache, I would complain about stuff that probably wasn't even wrong with me. And that's the only thing I could think of was does he feel guilty for calling me his leukemia child, and now here I am, his leukemia wife? And Mom informed me, she said, Natalia, he's going to be okay. He's going to be okay. And after thinking about it, I feel like that was God preparing him for what was to come. That he knew that we would be dealing with this in one way or another. And he was preparing Andy for this to happen. So as the night went on, my phone was going off. People that I hadn't talked to since I graduated from high school with, they came out of somewhere and started texting me, saying they were praying for me, got phone calls. It was crazy. I couldn't go to sleep that night due to the fact that everybody texted me. We get up that next morning, and we go to Louisville. I think we got up at like 5. We had to be there at 8. We're on our way, and like he said, the whole family was there. And they told us to have the family there because we thought they were going to do a bone marrow test. Well, that wasn't right. They just wanted like my mom and my dad, not the host flu. But everybody showed up, so it was good to have that support, especially on that first day because it was a total whirlwind. You had people coming in from one direction to the next, getting your blood work, having you sign papers. You don't even know what you were signing. You're probably signing your life away. Just everybody. I remember we had to sit there at one point for like 15 minutes, and a nurse or a clinician was reading paper. Just 6 pages, word for word, and she had to read it word for word. And here I'm thinking, okay, there's better things to be doing than sitting here listening to this. But she was informing us of the problems that you could have with chemotherapy. And, the funny part is that me and Andy weren't concerned about having kids at that point. But my mother-in-law and my mother, they were bound and determined to find out if we were still going to be able to have kids. While this nurse is going over this paperwork, my mother-in-law barges in and says, what about kids? And she said there's, options that we can do, but chemotherapy will, affect your ovaries and your possibility of having them. Well, God was with us because they sent the fertility people in, and they were able to suppress my ovaries. So there still is a chance that we can have kids on our own. So as the day goes on, I get my port and I get all of that fun stuff. The family starts going to the waiting area and they come in one by one. I start chemotherapy that night. I had it for 7 days, twice a day, in the morning and at night. You always hear that chemotherapy will make you sick. It'll do all these different things to you. And it did that to me. I had maybe 1 or 2 nights that I remember, it could have been worse, that I remember actually being sick. I had a fever one night and we're all like, oh gosh, that's awful, and the nurses were outside giving high fives because that was a good thing. So you just never know, what's going to happen, how you're going to react to certain things. And I realized that if you go in with the best attitude possible and with God on your side, it'll be totally different what that person next to you in that other room is going to go through. And so, the months in the hospital were fine, no biggie. And, the company that we got was astounding. The phone calls, my walls were covered. You couldn't even see the walls of the hospital with cards, gifts, and everything. And I don't even know what to say. Okay. So through this journey, I have learned so much about myself and about my family. And that, with God, everything is possible. Yeah. And that if you have faith in Him, that you can be the lowest of the lows, and you can rise right up to the top. Yes. And, I've also wondered myself, I think back to 9/11 and the people who actually made it through that 9/11. And I sit back and I'm a big Facebook guru. And I follow these kids all over the world. And one that sticks in my mind right now is Lane Goodwin from Beach Grove. Yes. And I sit there and I see what he's going through. And I think to myself, God, I've lived 26 years. That kid's only lived 13, 14 years. Let him live. Why am I the one that's on the up end who has had or seems to have no problems whatsoever, who has not really had to fight the fight? I've had to fight, but not as hard as Lane Goodwin or Josh Davis, who is from Campbellsville, or any of those other kids or individuals who are fighting for their lives. I'm not having to fight as hard as they are, and I thank God for that. But I pray that they seek God like I did whenever I was going through my journey. So, no matter how hard you have it, always remember, it may be the same situation, whether it's financials, whether it is family issues, you're having family trouble, or if you are going through a deadly illness, that somebody right next to you may have it 10 times worse than you do. So always be thankful, always be blessed for what you have, whether it's just a bowl of soup or, the family members that you have sitting next to you. You never know when that day's coming where they won't be there. So, anyways, after all that, I was put in remission in January for the first time. And then I had to go through Beatty to have 4 more rounds of chemotherapy, which lasted, I think, about 4 months. I finally finished that in June, so no more chemotherapy. They did another bone marrow biopsy in August, I think. On August 9th, I got the best phone call I probably could have ever received, and it happened to be on my nephew's birthday. I will never forget it. I had me. I was supposed to call them, and they said, there's not going to be any problems. You're going to be cleared, so we're not going to call you. You can just call us. Well, I get a nap. So I get a phone call the day before I was supposed to call. And they said, Natalia, and I said, yes. They said, your pathology reports are back. I said, okay. And my husband's in bed, and so I answered the phone, and they said, it's showing that there's no residual leukemia cells in your body. And I said, what? She said, yeah. She said, there's none. And I said, oh my goodness. And I said, you scared me. I said, you weren't supposed to call me. And she said, well, I wanted to let you know. And so I get off the phone, and I just sit there, and I boo-hoo, and I boo-hoo. And then I run back to the bedroom, and I said, Andy. He said, what? Which he'd seen on the caller ID that Louisville was calling. And here I am crying. He was like, what? And I said, Louisville called, and he said, Ann, I don't have any cancer left. And he said, well, what are you crying for? And I said, well, these are happy tears. I said, these are tears of joy that, I am cancer-free now. And he said, well, good. So now that that's all done and all my treatments are done, I now go back every month, once a month, to have blood work done. And let me tell you, those are the hardest days, because you never know when that blood work is going to come back messed up. So every month it's going to be hard, and I still have a long road ahead of me. It's not over. They say, I think after 3 years you're considered cured. It's going to be a long 3 years. But I do know that a year is coming up, and it's so hard to believe that it's almost been a year. And I just have 2 more left, and I know God has gotten me this far. And I'm excited. I'm ready to see what He's going to do for me for the next 2-3 years, for the rest of my life.
Yes.
I would like to see what He has planned for me. And it's so amazing, because I've had so many people who they find out their family members are going through something that I've gone through, or they need help with something, that I've dealt with, and they call me. And it's such a blessing to be able to talk to them and let them know, hey, it's going to be okay, or, this is what I went through whenever I did it. And, not everybody's different, or not everybody's the same. Everybody is different. Everybody's not the same, so they're not going to react to it the way I did. But I at least give them a sense of hope. I give them at least a sense of inspiration and faith, and to go on, to fight that fighting battle. And, it's not easy, guys. It's not. But with the support of your community, the support of your family, the support of people you don't even know, it does wonders on your mind, your body, and your spirit. And that's one thing I've learned, is that without that support, I don't think I would be as strong as I am now. And, I posted the other day, and I said, without cancer, I would not be who I am today. And I strongly believe that cancer was a blessing in disguise. And I can stand here today and say that I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm glad I got cancer. And you may think and say you're crazy, but if I hadn't gotten that, I wouldn't be strong. My faith would be not where it is now. My relationship with my husband, we've probably done been divorced. I mean, it's just amazing at how, those little things, those negative things, how you can so quickly turn them into a positive. And that's what everybody needs to learn to do, is turn those negatives into a positive, because you never know what's going to happen. You got to make the best of what you have, and don't look back. And that's one thing that I have truly learned through this journey. And my relationships with my family has increased tremendously. I feel like I smile a lot more. I'm happy about life, even though I don't want to go back to work right now. But I love sitting at home and doing nothing. and looking forward to us, eventually having kids or just getting out and doing stuff. And I'm so blessed beyond words. And so if I have anything left to say, I really don't. But um, I just pray that you all find what I found through God, and that you all find that strength, and you all find that faith through Him.